Welcome, gentlemen of the press, to my World Press Conference. I received the judgment of the Imo State Election Petition Tribunal with so much sadness and disappointment. The tribunal had in its judgment dismissing my petition stated that I was unable to prove that there was substantial non-compliance with the Electoral Act in the conduct of the 11th November 2023 Imo State Governorship election. According to the tribunal, my inability to prove that there was substantial non-compliance with the Electoral Act in that election stemmed from my non-production of the beavers machine before the tribunal. Besides the fact that the production of the beavers machine before the tribunal was the responsibility of INEC, both as a party to the petition and as a public institution, I had endeavored to ensure that the beavers was brought before the tribunal by obtaining an order from the same tribunal compelling INEC to produce the beavers machine before the tribunal. However, INEC brazenly refused to abide by the order of the same tribunal directing it to produce before it the beavers machine. It may interest you to note that the same INEC had, prior to the commencement of hearing of my petition before the tribunal, refused to grant access to Labour Party accredited inspectors to inspect the beavers machine in line with an order of the same tribunal. This is regardless of the fact that INEC had extorted from me millions of naira purportedly as a deposit for the cost of the inspection of the beavers machine. The said inspection never held, and INEC has held on to the money. Interestingly, the tribunal neither made any comment on this INEC's malfeasance, nor sanctioned INEC for flouting its order, which was tantamount to contempt in facie curia, contempt in the face of the court. It is worthy of note that at the stage of the collation of the election result at the Imo State Governorship Election Collation Center, where our party's state collation agent, this gentleman here, the LP state chairman, Barrister Callistus Ihejiagwa, was beaten ruthlessly simply because he attempted to draw the attention of the Imo State Governorship Election Returning Officer, Professor Sunday Fashion Abayomi, to the fact that there was need for him, the Imo State Governorship Election, the Governorship Election Returning Officer, to comply with the provisions of the Electoral Act in paragraphs 48, sub-paragraphs A and B of INEC regulations and guidelines for the conduct of elections 2022, which expressly stipulated that an election result shall only be collated if the collation officer ascertains that the number of accredited voters agrees with the number recorded in the beavers, and votes scored by the political parties on the result sheet is correct and agrees with the results electronically transmitted or transferred directly from polling units as prescribed. Our party state collation agent therefore urged the returning officer to suspend the collation exercise and request for the production of records of beavers accreditation to enable him ascertain that the number of accredited voters agrees with the number recorded in the beavers, and votes scored by political parties on the result sheet is correct and agrees with the results electronically transmitted or transferred directly from polling units. Unfortunately, gentlemen, the said INEC collation returning officer bluntly refused to comply with the mandatory provisions of the INEC regulations and guidelines and mocked our party's agent to go to court. If the INEC collation and returning officer had complied mandatory provisions of the Electoral Act, complied with the mandatory provisions of the Electoral Act and INEC guidelines, the issues of overvoting would have been cured at that point, like Professor Nenna Uti did in Abia State. My dear compatriots, as we all saw in the full glare of national television, the said LP State Party collation agent, this gentleman here, was not only beaten mercilessly in the presence of state security agents, but was quickly and humiliatingly dragged out of the state collation center as soon as he mentioned the Abia State scenario, where the then sagacious Abia State Governorship election returning officer, Professor Nenoti, stood up for democracy against all forces and suspended collation until the discrepancies between the figures in the result sheets and the Beavers report were reviewed, and tented results rejected and discountenanced before a winner was announced. Having sent our party state collation agent away from the collation center with the assurance that he has been securely locked up by the police, the returning officer hurriedly collated and announced the unverified governorship election results, and without let or hindrance in the middle of the night, declared the winner where there ought not to be any. The decision of the tribunal that the Beavers machine must be brought before the tribunal to prove overvoting was hinged on the Supreme Court of Nigeria decision in the case of Oyetola versus INEC in Osun State. A cursory look at that case, gentlemen, will show that Oyetola's case and mine are not the same in all fours. The circumstances are totally different, a world apart. In Oyetola's case, the court was saddled with the difficulty of deciding which of the three different Beavers reports presented by three different parties, all certified by INEC as true copies of the product of the ubiquitous Beavers machine, was authentic. In that case, gentlemen, it was necessary for the court to demand to have the Beavers machine brought right before her for demonstration, and perhaps to undertake a little inquiry of her own as to what possibly was produced by the Beavers in court. In my own petition, gentlemen, there was only one uncontested, uncontroverted, and uncontradicted Beavers report validly issued by INEC. In addition to the Beavers report are uncontroverted testimonies of my witnesses which corroborated the report. The fact that the testimonies of my witnesses were not in any way challenged by any other parties to the petition with regards to what transpired in the various polling units in law ought to be deemed as admitted without more. My case was that the witnesses observed what happened at the polling units, that there were overvoting, and their observations was corroborated completely by the Beavers report. During trial, the tribunal deliberately curtailed the 60 days statutorily allowed by law for me to give evidence in court to 12 days of only 4 hours, thereby making it impossible for all the 1,600 witnesses listed in my petition to testify. Sadly, the said tribunal, in its judgment, stated that the 43 witnesses I was able to call within the 4-hour-a-day hearing was not adequate to justify my claim of substantial non-compliance with the Electoral Act, thereby, gentlemen, standing justice on its head. With the kind of judgment on my petition, the rape of democracy and elections in Imo State is continuing unabated.